MID90S is a new film directed by Jonah Hill. Yes, that Jonah Hill. It is his directorial debut, and it is a story that, as you might have guessed from the title, takes place in the mid-90s, and it surrounds a group of skateboarders. A large portion of the cast for this film is made up of unprofessional actors and real-life skateboarders. I think the only actress of note in here might be Katherine Waterston. You might recognize her from the Fantastic Beasts movies. So like I said, the story of this movie centers around a group of skateboarders. There's a young kid played by Sonny Solstick, I think is his name. He's got some family drama going on at home with his mom and his brother, and he just wants a way to get out. He wants a way to escape. Then he starts hanging out with this older group of kids who skateboard and they drink and they smoke and they party and they have a good time enjoying life in the 90s. The more that he hangs out with them, the more that he becomes integrated into the group, and the more he starts doing some of the same shit that they're doing. And so it's kind of a coming of age story, him as the main character and skateboarding as the backdrop for the entire film. Sometimes when I see first time director pop up and then it's like a noteworthy actor that we've seen before, like Jonah Hill, we've seen him around, right? You kind of wince a little bit because you don't really know what to expect. It could either be boom or bust for them. Luckily, I think that Jonah Hill does approach this story and this film with the kind of technique and the kind of style that I think should benefit him in future projects going forward. One thing I like about the way that he directed this film was the way that it was shot. He decided to shoot this film with a different aspect ratio. As far as the aspect ratio goes, not a lot of people think about it when they're watching a movie, but in this movie, it's kind of hard to avoid noticing. He shoots this movie in 4:3 aspect ratio, and he also shoots it on 90mm, and as a result, it gives this film this layer of authenticity that I don't know if it would have had if it had been shot on regular cameras. Everything about the way that this film was shot and the way that the frames were lined up, it feels very intimate, it feels very personal. It almost feels like you're a fly on the wall and you're watching all of this shit taking place, and you're watching these characters talk and you're listening to their conversations, and it puts you in the moment with them. And I think that was a very unique technique to use for this film. I think it grounds the film. I think it just puts you in that nostalgic frame of mind, and it really makes you feel like you're watching a throwback movie. Because it's easy to take a movie called Mid-90s and put it in the mid-90s and try to have a bunch of references to make it feel like the mid-90s, but sometimes it's the aesthetics and the way that a film looks that really takes you back to that time period. Just like the skateboarding and the stuff that skateboarders do in this movie to try to make themselves known, to get themselves seen, to get themselves noticed. If you're somebody that loves skateboarding and you treat skateboarding as a sport and an art or whatever you look at it as, I feel like you're going to walk away from this movie enjoying a lot of that shit too. It's a 90s movie, it's going to have a great soundtrack, or at least a soundtrack that sounds great to me since I am a 90s baby and I'm from that era. There are so many great songs that fill out the runtime that really capture the mood and the energy of every scene that Jonah Hill's trying to go for. As far as the performances in the movie, I would say that almost everybody was good or above average, I would say. The main character played by Sonny Solstick or whatever, he was pretty good. Unfortunately, he's not even the most interesting character in the movie. The most interesting character in the movie and the best performance in the movie by far goes to this character named Ray, who was played by Nikel Smith, I believe is his name. He's kind of the leader of this group of skateboarders. He's clearly the most talented and the most driven and the most focused of the skateboarders. In fact, he's probably the most emotionally intelligent person in the entire film. I don't know why, but I just felt way more invested in him as a character compared to everybody else, and it's not to say that anybody else was horrible or bad or whatever. It's just he kind of stole the show for me. Being that it is a 90s era type of movie, there are going to be some moments that are going to make you feel like, that was kind of corny or cringe, or it's from back in the days. There's going to be a couple of moments where characters are saying things that might offend a few people. We have come a long way since the 90s, obviously. We're in 2018. That was like 20 plus something years ago. But the bottom line is people back then talked a little bit different than they do today. And specifically as it relates to some of the slurs and some of the language that some of these skateboarders are using, I do feel like some people might get offended by that. If you can get past that though and appreciate that it is a period piece, I think there is definitely a lot to enjoy about this film. Unfortunately, while I think that Jonah Hill did a pretty decent job overall with the direction, and it is a film I somewhat enjoyed, I think the film is way too flawed for me to say that it's a great movie. For starters, there is a lot of conflict and a lot of emotional turmoil that is set up between the main character of the movie, Stevie, and his mother and his brother, and unfortunately this is a lot of conflict that never gets any payoff. It is very poorly developed, especially the relationship between him and his mother. His mother is very underused. She's not really in the film that much. Specifically, the way that certain characters interact with Stevie, and specifically, like if you take his brother, the way that his brother interacts with him, it doesn't really make a lot of sense, and the movie doesn't really have a lot of background for why these characters are acting the way they are and why the relationship is what it is. Later on in the movie, when they're trying to get you to feel something about this certain aspect of the movie, I'm sorry, I just didn't really give a shit. I also have to warn you, there's a scene in the movie that's kind of awkward, or at least it felt awkward to me, and it could just be a personal thing with me. I'm not going to spoil the scene. It takes place at a party. It involves a boy and a girl. That's really all I'm going to say. And like I said, this could just be a personal thing with me, or it could be that the movie was intentionally trying to make me uncomfortable, but this scene, it was just kind of weird to get through. My issue isn't even really that the scene itself is kind of weird to watch. My issue is also that it doesn't really do anything for the characters. In fact, it kind of diminishes a female character in the movie that admittedly doesn't have a huge role, but it's just something that you notice when you're watching. Finally, I will say that even though there was something really cool and sweet that was set up at the end of the film, I feel like the movie just kind of ended really abruptly. I'm just saying I don't think that the ending was earned the way that they wanted it to feel earned. Like, it's kind of cool and there's something that happens at the end, but overall it just ended very suddenly, and all the payoff and all the things that they were building up towards, there's no conclusion, there's no resolution to it. The movie just kind of ends and you're just kind of like, oh, okay. Mid-90s was a fun, nostalgic trip down memory lane. It had good music. It had some pretty good performances. Skateboarders should like it. I am not a skateboarder because I've always been afraid of doing flip kicks and then the skateboard hits me in the nuts, and I'm just not ready for that kind of life. Overall, I would say this is a solid but not spectacular watch, and I'm going to barely put it above positive in the golden age for Man of Steel. Those are my thoughts on Mid-90s. Tell me if you've seen the movie, what did you think about the movie, and put your favorite 90s era song in the comment section below. Please like and subscribe to the Superfan Show, and as always, if you like what you see, tell me how you feel, and stay tuned to hear more from the Man of Steel. Peace.